important for you to know in this that you must first know that the triangles are congruent before you can apply CP-CTC. Okay. What would you like to do here?
I was going to pause that for you while you were.
Okay, let's take a look at this figure here. Remember the rule with CP-CTC is that we must first know that the two triangles are congruent. Okay? So let's take a look at triangle ABC, okay, which is divided into two triangles. So we have triangle ABD and triangle CBD. And then let's figure out if those two triangles are congruent. And if they are, let's figure out how. Okay, now looking at those two triangles, can we say that those are congruent? Raise your hand if you think you know one of the four ways that we could prove that this is congruent. Tyler?
You can prove it by side angle side.
Side angle side. So what? Okay, so you're saying that segment BD is congruent to segment BD, which would be reflexive, right?
Yeah.
So we now have side and another pair of sides and an angle, a pair of angles in the middle. So we could say side, angle, side. And that angle is included, isn't it? So we could say the triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. Okay. Now, once we prove that those triangles are congruent, now we can apply CP-CTC. Okay, so we now have CP-CTC, which is corresponding we now have corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So we already know that this side right here is congruent, and these two sides are congruent, and these two angles are congruent. But once we've proven that the triangles are congruent, now we could say that angle A is congruent to angle C because they're corresponding. And we could say angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD because those are also corresponding. We could also say that side AB is congruent with side CB. Okay? Now, we could only apply that with CP-CTC after we prove that the triangles are congruent. Go ahead, draw this figure. Let's put our given and our proof here, and we'll talk about, instead of in a two-column proof, which actually are a lot of fun, but let's just talk about how we can get from point A, which is our given, to where we want to go. So draw. Okay, now that we've drawn our figure, let's go through the given. We've been given the fact that the distance from A to B is congruent to the distance of C to D. So look right up here. This is direct information that's stated on the picture, okay? Or it's been given to us. and it says AB is parallel to CD. And that's also direct information that's actually stated on the drawing or given to us, right? Those are things that we've seen and we understand what they are, right? We have to prove that AD, segment AD, is congruent to segment CB. So this is going to be congruent to CB. Now, this is how I do stuff with this. I look at what's been given to us, which is direct information. From that direct information, I have to use the knowledge that we've been talking about to come up with indirect information. Or how I like to say it is, how can I move information around based upon what's been given to us? Now, it's important to notice that they told us that these lines are parallel and that these are congruent. Okay? So, what information could I move around or imply or have indirect information because I have two parallel lines? Think about that.
Yes.
Sometimes it helps if I clean stuff up. Here's our two parallel lines, and here's a transversal. Mr. Marsh?
Yeah.
So looking at this, I have two parallel lines and a transversal. What do we know about two parallel lines and a transversal? What are some things that we can talk about with those? Early on, we talked about those.
Alternate interior angles.
Alternate interior angles between parallel lines are what? Are congruent. Okay? So they're congruent. So I have to look to see which angles really are formed with this. Okay? So I can say this angle is congruent to this angle. Okay? So if I move that to here, those two angles are congruent.
They sure are.
Now, I have to remember, I need three things to prove triangles are congruent, whether it's three sides or a combination of angles and sides. Now I have a side and an angle. What are you thinking?
DB is congruent to DB.
So you're saying DB
Reflexive.
is congruent to DB by reflexive property. I agree with that. So now I've got a side, an angle, and a side. Okay? Does that prove that those two triangles are congruent?
Yeah.
Angle side angle.
Yeah, I could say now through side, angle, side.
Side angle, right?
Yeah, not side, angle, angle. I could say through side, angle, side. My side here, let me get the highlighter. My side here, and then my angle, and another side here, and on the same on the other triangle, if I say a side and an angle and a side, now we can say that those two triangles are congruent. So let me erase some stuff up here, and let's write a congruent statement. So now we can say that triangle, and I'm going to start down here, I'm going to say DAB is congruent to triangle. How are we going to say that? If I started and went DAB, so what am I going to start? I'm going to start with corresponding parts. So if I started at D and went to A to B,
You go B, C, D.
I'm going to go B, C, D. So now, here's the important part. I've proven that those triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. But that's still not giving us what we've been asked to prove here. can say that these two triangles are congruent by CP-CTC. Okay? They're congruent by side angle side, but now we can say that corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. I think I said that wrong. I said that those two triangles are congruent by CPTC, but that's not true. They're congruent by side angle side. Now we can apply CP-CTC. Okay? So, we can now say that side AD is congruent to side CB. They're corresponding sides, and we've proven that they're congruent. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stress this one more time. You have to prove that the triangles are congruent with one of the four ways we've talked about. Okay. Then you can apply CP-CTC. Prove they're congruent, then you can apply. What's that, Ryan?
That acronym kind of sounds like you're talking about a mental disorder or something.
A mental disorder? Well, I guess it could be.